In this video, we're going to talk a little bit more about data types. Up until now, we've been creating variables and constants using something called type inference. So let's say variable, and we'll say it is named x, and we'll say it is equal to the value my string variable. So what we did here is we never actually specified explicitly that we want this variable x to be a string. All we did was say, hey, we're creating a variable and we're going to give it this value. Well, the compiler or the playground says that this is a string right here. So if we're going to be assigning a string to the variable x, then we're going to assume that we want x to be a string data type. So again, we don't have to explicitly state x is to be a string. It assumes it's going to be a string because that's what it's equal to. So if we try to assign a non-string variable, like an integer like 21, we try to assign the integer to a string, we get this error message that says cannot assign value of type int to type string. We cannot assign this int to this string variable. But if we try to assign a string, in this case, this is a string that says 21, then there's no problem with that. We have no error message because we're not assigning an integer. We're assigning a string. Now, that probably made sense to you. But there's one other thing I want to point out, which, in my opinion, it's kind of difficult to get used to, especially if you're familiar with other programming languages like C#. This is something that Swift is very, it's unique with, I'd say. So Swift has a very clear delineation between different numeric data types. Up until now, we've only been working with integers. So let's say, let's just say that the variable x is equal to 12, and the variable y is equal to 17, and the variable z is equal to 8.4. What happens if we try to add the variables x and y? And then what happens if we try to add the variables x and z together? Let's test it. X plus y and x plus z. Look at that. This one's totally fine, but we get an error message. So what happened here is these two variables, x and y, they're both considered to be integers. And you can add integers together, you can subtract, multiply, divide, whatever you want. However, variable z is considered to be a double. A double is basically any variable that includes a number after the decimal point. Even if this was 8.0, it would still be considered a double. And for some reason, Swift does not allow you to perform math operations between integers like x and doubles like z. So you can do a couple of things. You can turn x into a double. So we could do 12.0, and that'll get rid of this error message right here. But guess what? That's created a second error message, or a replacement error message, because now we're trying to add x, which is a double, to y, which is still an integer. So we'd have to add a 0.0 here as well. And now the error messages are gone. And all three of these are doubles. If, however, you would prefer not to add that 0.0 afterwards, there's actually a much more common way to do this. To declare a variable as a particular type, what you do is after the variable name, you do a colon, and then you specify the variable type. So in this case, double, and then same thing here. So even though it's just a regular 12, there is no decimal point afterwards, this is still considered to be a double because we include this specification here and here. And pay close attention, the first letter is capitalized. That is mandatory. If you lowercase it, you'll get some error messages, and this will not count as a double. You can do the same thing with variables like W. Let's make the variable W a string data type. And by the way, if you declare a variable in this way, you do not need to assign a value to it. Notice how we're not getting any error messages right now. That's because if you declare the variable type, that means you do not have to assign a value initially. This right here is not mandatory if you declare the type of variable. The term for doing this, where we clearly specify the type here, or here, or here, the term for this is type annotation. So if you are specifying the type of variable when it's initially created, that's called type annotation. Let's see what happens if we try to specify z as an integer. And as you can see, we have an error message. This number right here is a double. It's just a double. 8.4 is not an integer at all. And we're trying to assign this double value to an integer. It's not going to work. It gives an error message. So please be careful when you're performing math operations or doing stuff like this. Make sure you have your data types aligned properly, and you shouldn't have problems. Just make sure to keep track of this stuff. So that's it for this video. I hope it was useful, and I will see you in the next video.